Hello and good afternoon, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started in about just 1 minute. We got a few folks still joining up. We'll get started in about 1 minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everybody. We got a ton of ground to cover, so I don't want to spare, I'm going to spare you that long introduction. So all you need to know about me is that my name is Ralph, and I'm on a mission to consolidate software and to hopefully simplify information systems for you all, for local government. And today we're going to take a giant step forward in doing just that. So welcome to Department and Community-Wide Data Solutions with Microsoft 365. What we're going to do today is we're going to learn how we can move beyond just Microsoft Excel for managing your department and your organization-wide data. We're going to use a couple of pieces of technology within the Microsoft 365 technology stack. We're going to be using Microsoft SharePoint Lists, Microsoft Forms, and Microsoft Power Automate. The good news is everything that you see here today has been built with basic Microsoft 365 tools, meaning that if you have a Microsoft 365 license, you'll be able to create these things too. Before we get moving though, throughout the session, I'll be asking for you to chime in, and I know the easiest way to do that with large groups like this is to do that through the chat. So we're going to run through a little exercise before we get going here. So let's make sure everybody's chat is working. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you all a question. But before I do that, I want you to go ahead and look around your Microsoft Teams interface. Find that button that says chat on it. Go ahead and click that. Open up the chat window. Should be on the side there. At the bottom of it, you should have the ability to type a message. And I want you to get ready to answer this question here. So if you were granted any superpower you can imagine, what superpower would you want to be granted? So go ahead and type in the chat, what superpower would you want to have? I'll go ahead and add mine first. All right, they're starting to roll in here. Libby, Scott, you want to fly? That's a good one. That would be pretty exhilarating to be able to take flight from anywhere. I want to teleport. I always say I'd love to go travel the world and be home for dinner at night. Brad, we got another teleportation, flying. Everybody would be truthful. I like that. Infinite food, love it. Flying, teleportation, flying, invincibility. Yeah, that would be sneaky, wouldn't that, Stevie? All right, teleportation. All right, so good confirmation that we have a chat. The chat is active. The chat is live. We can use the chat. So later on, when I ask for some ideas, I want you to go ahead, come back to that chat. If you have a question throughout the course of the presentation today, please go ahead and pop that in the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that and get those questions answered in when we have a few moments to break. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the main show, main event here. So why? Why do you care about this? Why not just use Excel to manage data, information for your departments, for your entire organization? And really the answer to that lies within like, what is Excel? What should Excel be used for? And then we can take a look at one of these other tools that is available to you, and that is a SharePoint list. And what are some of those advantages to a SharePoint list? So I'm sharing out a couple quick slides. I promise you this is not a slide-based presentation today. It's going to be more active. We're going to be building things together here on the fly. But just want to lay some foundation, want to lay the groundwork here for why move away from Microsoft Excel. And really the answer to that is Excel was developed it's gone by a bunch of different names over the years. I think VisiCalc was one of the first versions of that way back when in the 80s, but it was really developed as a tool for people in finance. And I know we have quite a few finance folks on here, and I'm sure you use Excel quite a bit. Help calculate things, help with accounting practices, all that good stuff. And really, that's what Excel was founded in. That's what Excel is good at. You can plug in calculations, you can do math quickly, you can set up nice spreadsheets to help you with organizing your finances and to do some light analysis with that. You've all seen some of those charts that you can produce, those nice pie charts, bar charts, all of that stuff comes out of Excel. And what we've done is we've used Excel because it's so flexible and easy to use. We've started storing some really important data that may be important to our entire departments or our organization as a whole. We've been storing that in Excel, and for light purposes, I think that's fine. If you need to track something and just you need to see that, or maybe you and one other person need to see that, Excel is a quick way to get something stood up. It has the powerful tools within it to help with calculations, all that stuff. So Excel is a decent tool for that. But as soon as you are tracking things like inventories or assets, things that could be beneficial to not just you, but maybe your division, maybe your department, or maybe your community or organization overall, Excel starts to break down a bit for that because you kind of silo that information and very few people have access to it. So therein lies another tool that we're going to talk extensively about today, and that tool is Microsoft SharePoint Lists. Before we dive into specifically about lists, Microsoft SharePoint, if you're not familiar with that, that is a tool. It's part of the Microsoft 365 technology platform. So one of dozens of tools that you get with your Microsoft 365 subscription. But SharePoint gives you the ability to manage your organization's files and data in one central place and gives you the ability to collaborate on that amongst your peers, amongst your coworkers. At a high level, that's what SharePoint does. So why use Microsoft SharePoint Lists? Well, so going beyond Excel, SharePoint Lists gives you the ability to organize your data, better structure your data. So input into that list, you can define what kind of data types it is, and we'll go over that here in just a little bit. You can add metadata to it. So once you move on from your organization, that list will stay there in that SharePoint environment. Whomever needs access to it will be granted access to that list, and there will be metadata behind it, which is just a fancy word for saying it will communicate what the purpose of each of those fields are that you have developed out into that list. So, if you have an address field in one of your lists, you need to track an address. You can have some metadata behind that to say, this is the address of the said facility or the said business or whatever. So there's a little bit more context. So ideally, when you move on, the person coming behind you will understand what the purpose of that piece of data is for. So having metadata behind it is really, really important. My favorite piece is the integration with the rest of Microsoft 365. Yes, Excel can integrate with Microsoft 365, but it's not as, the information out of it isn't as readily available, isn't as friendly, isn't as sustainable to integrate that with other components, other systems, other applications throughout Microsoft 365. So later on, we're going to take a look at Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Power Automate. All of that stuff integrates seamlessly with these SharePoint lists, and it's a really, really powerful tool to start building out your own solutions. Again, getting back to my mission and helping you all consolidate your systems so it's easier to find what you need to find. We'll also see that there's, obviously some differences between these systems, but there's also some similarities. So what I like about SharePoint Lists is the fact that it should feel somewhat familiar. So for those of you who are using Microsoft Excel to track your inventories, track your data, SharePoint behaves very similar to that. So it's not that too difficult of a leap to start using SharePoint Lists. All right, so that is the reason why we want to look at SharePoint lists in lieu of Excel. Again, this is for department-wide data, department-wide inventories, organization-wide stuff. Start looking at SharePoint lists. So we're all familiar with Excel. Let's move on to some demonstration here. So we're all familiar with Excel. Here's a blank sheet. I've loaded this thing up. We can start building out our inventory. The first use case that we're going to start exploring here is a solution for managing facilities and managing facility inspections. So let's use this as an opportunity to demonstrate how we would start tracking our facility inventory in Excel. And then from there, we'll demonstrate how to do this in Microsoft SharePoint Lists. So here's where I need your help here. So get back into the chat here. So think about facility inventory for your community. What types of information are you going to want to store based on a facility? So think about a facility, obviously facility name, whatever you call it, the title of that facility. What is some other information that you all want to track about your facilities? Again, this is about the building itself, the facility, not the inspection piece. That'll be a whole separate thing that we talk about later. So just go ahead and throw in the chat. What kind of information do you want to store on the facilities? Libby, I see PIN number here. What else do you all have? I'll start building out as you guys go ahead and pop that stuff in the chat, and I'll pick a couple of additional things to include in there. So I'm going to start with facility name. Facility name, we have year built. Check the chat here. We got address, of course. Address, square footage. All right. We'll pick off some of these later, these items here later when we go to build this out in our SharePoint list. Don't want to bore you all too much here with our friend Microsoft Excel, since most of you have done this a zillion times already. So let me just add a couple of facilities in here. Let's say we got Village Hall. 2004 that was built. I'm just going to use our address on 1 Lee Street. All right, let's say this is 25,000 square feet. All right, so starting to build out our Excel list here. Let me zoom in a couple of clicks, make that more legible here. All right, so we got our facility name, year built, address, square footage. All right, and you guys may or may not do this, but it's a good practice for me in Excel. I always format my lists that I'm using in Excel as a table, so then I get the ability to do all the good stuff, sorting and filtering. So I click this format as a table here, and let me go ahead and do that. My table does have headers here, so now we have a nice little table. So if we want to add the police station here, say that's a 1989 building. Just reuse the address here, and let's say that is 13,000 square feet. All right, so now I have the ability to sort it by facility name, sort it by year, go smallest to largest. Okay, so very quick and easy way to start building out a data table for tracking. The challenge here that we run into, though, is this is mine. This is my Excel sheet. Yes, I can share this out. If I do put it up into Microsoft 365, I can share that out with the coworker, so somebody else may be able to see that. But it's not really available to everybody in my department. I'd have to go through and add everybody to this and share it out to them individually. But this information is probably useful to not just my department, but maybe many departments. You know, perhaps we want to use this inventory for you know, the building division within the Public Works Department. Perhaps the village manager's office may want to see this inventory here as they're going through their capital planning and preparation. So we can make this data much more available if we move it into a SharePoint list. It gives us much more control on who we share this out with and how the data is populated into this. So let's get to it. Let's set aside our old friend Excel. Still serves us a really, really good purpose, and it's a very, very helpful tool. All right, let's go over here. I'm going to actually open up Microsoft Teams in our development environment here. Just a couple of things before we really dive in to SharePoint List. So a couple of big things that we have to have in place before we get building and developing here in the Microsoft 365 environment. So what we're looking at here is Microsoft Teams. Why we're looking at Teams is because we describe Microsoft Teams as your window into Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 has dozens of different applications. Those integrate all within Teams. So to give the best experience to you all in finding information, we find that putting everything in Teams so you can just go to one place to find all this is that best experience. The other important thing to note, and probably outside of your control, but maybe within somebody else's control within your organization or your IT folks, is that you have to have a good foundation laid out. You have to have your Microsoft 365 environment architected in a way that kind of mirrors your organization so you can start building out these data tools and then sharing them with the appropriate people. If it's a mess, if there's zillions and zillions of these different teams here on I'm seeing on the left-hand side, it becomes difficult to decide, where do I want to put this data? Which group do I want to associate with this? Which group do I want to invite in to edit or view this data? So having a good foundation is critical. So for those that I actively work with, we have this foundation in place. It is important that we have that in place because now we can build on top of that. We know where things are slotted, where things go, where to put our data. For those that I personally don't work with, you'll want to talk to your folks in IT or whoever's managing your Microsoft 365 environment and make sure you have good architecture in place. So I'll get off my soapbox on that, but that is critical for the success of what we're going to take a look at today. So again, we're looking at the different teams and channels that I'm associated with. Since I'm an administrator, I see everybody's team and channel, but we have this all staff area. This is something that everybody in my organization would see. And then underneath here, each department has its own area, and that's a place for them to communicate, store files, and to build out these different data tables here. So all staff area, that's a place where we can publish data that we want available to our organization overall. And then we have these subset departments here, which is another place. If we want just the department to have access to files and data, we have the ability to pin those things, publish those out just for that department. All right. Now let's get back to it. We are supposed to be building out a SharePoint list for our facility inventory. So let me go here. I'm going to go to our home site here. This is actually just SharePoint, secret. It's just SharePoint embedded within Teams here, but it helps give us the experience to staff that they just go to Teams. They don't have to go to SharePoint. But since we are going to be building here, and eventually we will pin the data here, make that accessible to the rest of the Public Works Department. I don't have a facility inventory here yet, but we will do that here in just a little bit. I'm actually going to open this up in my browser, so I'm going to open up the Public Works site here, because I get much more ability to do some editing, and then I have the ability to start building out our first SharePoint list for our facility inventory. So to do that, because I'm a member of this Public Works group, or I'm the owner of it, if I was a member, I'd have the ability to add a new list here. So if you're a member of a group, you will have the ability to create a new SharePoint list. To do that, you go here, click this new button in the upper left-hand corner. You get a handful of different options here. The top one is the list. So that's what we're going to do. You'll see a pop-up here. Coming up here, we have some options. There's some templates that Microsoft gives you. You also have the ability to import from your existing Excel files and start to migrate that data up here into SharePoint. So you can import from Excel, CSV, a different list within Microsoft 365. There's also some templates you can get started with. Kind of gives you a sense of some of the things that are out there and available to you. I personally have never successfully implemented one of these templates here. I typically start from scratch, which is just this top left option here, creating a list. All right, so let's go ahead and create this list. I don't want the list to show up in my navigation in SharePoint. We're going to pin that later, so I always check that off, and we're going to call this our facility inventory. All right, go ahead and create this list here. And take a second or two to start building out this list, and then it's going to launch you into that list. All right, let me check back on the chat here. Let's see some of the fields we want to add in here. So, okay. All right, age, square foot, address, very common things here. All right, so now we're looking at the blank SharePoint list that we just created here. It gives you your first field here, which is called a title field. Title field by default is the thing that it's the thing that is connected to the search in SharePoint Microsoft 365. So I like to use the title as like my primary key for those technical people, but really the primary bit of information about the data that I am setting up here. So for our facility inventory, I'm going to use the facility name as that piece of information for our title. It'll allow me to search for that here in the future. Now we can start adding additional columns here, and we can start collecting and building out our template for the data that we want to maintain on our facility. So I'm going to click this add a column here. And one of the benefits to this is that now we can start deciding what data types that we add in here. So we have things like text, which is just a single text field. We have the ability to do choices. So that'll be a drop down when you want to select something and you want somebody to only pick one of the three options. You can use that choice field. We have a date and time field. We have people, which connects back to your Microsoft environment. So you can pick your coworkers and stuff out of that, and it just pre-selects them. Numbers, yes and no. I'm not going to go through all of these things. We'll kind of demonstrate some of these as we move along the way here. So let's add in address as our first one. I'm going to add that as a text field here. And click next. We'll see creating the column pops up here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to type in address. I'm going to add this description. This is that metadata piece I was talking about earlier. So we want to just highlight here, this is the address for the facility, just to make that clear for anybody entering data in today and in the future. We have some additional options here. We can maximize the number of characters. Let's say we're never going to have a facility name more than 100. You can require that this information is filled out here. So you got a handful of options to help make sure that you have good data. I see Karen Young in the chat asked if we're going to be sharing a recording of this. Yeah, we absolutely will be. Recording it started when we started out this webinar, so you all will have access to this in the future as well. Okay, so we've created our first column here in our SharePoint list. We have an address field here. We go back to our list of fields to add here. We have age, square feet. Let's add some of these in here. Age, I'm going to use actually use the date field on that. And I'm going to call this one, I don't know, year built. I'm not the best data person here, so this is where I'd turn to my team to help me decide how to actually build out the structure for this, but we're just going to call it year built. We'll put a date in there, and then we can always calculate the age off of that in the future when we need that information based on today's current date. So date and time, yep, I'm going to just leave that as is, not make any adjustments on here. Let's add that square footage in here. That's going to be a number field. Square footage. This is the square footage of the facility. All right, it's a number field here. We got the separator in there. We don't need decimals on this. We don't need to be that precise. All right, let's save that. Okay, so we got our first few fields here built out. We can start creating our facility inventory. So now to do that, you can do that one of two ways. The easiest way, I guess the safest way to do that is to click the upper left-hand corner button, add new item, and we're going to start filling out information about this facility. So let's use Village Hall again. Let's see if our address is pasted. Nope, 701 Lee Street, Des Plaines, Illinois, 16. Let's say this place, I think this was built in the 70s. Let's say 10/15/1978. Square footage, let's say this is 2,500 at our square feet. We can add an attachment here. You know what? Actually, let's do this. Let's add a column here. Let's add an image field here. So I like to use the image field over using the attachments on here just because it's more specific. And let's just say facility image is our title. Image and image of the facility. All right, save that there. And let's see if I have I think I downloaded a couple of pictures ahead of this to add some images in here to make this stuff come to life a little bit. All right, so I got Village Hall here, got our address, year built, our square footage. Can shrink this, make it grow. Facility image. So now I need to go here and edit this. So I can either click this little link here and it'll open it up in a nice little panel here, and I can add in my facility image. It's going to pop this up. Let's see, where do I got this? I do have a Village Hall image. Perfect. All right. It automatically saves it. It's in there. I can just go ahead and click out of this, and now I have my image of Village Hall. All right, let's add a second one in here. I saw that I had a police image saved, so let's add the police station. Let's say this is 701 Lee Street and Des Plaines as well. All right, let's say that one was built in 2004. 115. Oops. All right, that should be good. 3,600. Let's upload that police station in here as our image. Voila. Save that. And we are in. Now we got 2 facilities in our list here. All right, last thing before we start pinning this and making it available to our staff. SharePoint Lists, a really nice feature of this is you can change how this information is presented. And you can do that through views. So what I'm going to do, so you have like the option to, as we start collecting lots of data here, you have the ability to do like filtering. So we're able to kind of narrow down, you know, which facilities were built based on what day, which you can imagine being helpful for like capital planning purposes. You have your square footage, so you can start, you know, as this list gets long, you can start using these filters to help narrow down your data. You also have the ability to do sorting, so you can sort by smaller to larger. So you get all of that kind of feature that you're used to in Excel. But one of the major benefits is you can do these different views, so you can see the data a little bit differently here. So I'm going to create a view here that just it's called Facility Cards. And I'm going to use this gallery, just one of the kind of the default view types you get. So a list is kind of what we're seeing here. Calendar, if it's more date-based, the data that you're entering in, you can have a calendar view, so it just looks like a calendar that you can cycle through. But we're going to use this gallery here, which kind of gives you the flexibility at viewing this information in more of like a box, a square, which will be nice if we add the picture in there. So let's see if I can figure this out here on the fly. Oh, it did it automatically for me. Look at that. So now we have this other view. We have the facility cards view. So now I get a little preview of what the Village Hall looks like, what the police station looks like. So I have a different view on this data. Here's the more tabular view on this data, like you're kind of used to seeing in Excel, but I have this nice little view here that I can use for a variety of different purposes, you know, mainly publishing this out on places where, you know, I would want somebody to see, maybe an elected official to see, oh, here's all of our facilities, and then they can put the visual representation behind that as well. You can edit these just like you would on that list view. You just double click it, pulls open this pop-up here. You can edit any of that image or that information here. So let's say, you know, I was wrong. Square footage on Village Hall, which is probably more like 30,000. All right, so then that saved it there. I get that little prompt. Now I can exit out of this. So now I have both of these views up here, so I can cycle back and forth between how I want to see this. This all items is still the default view. You have the ability to change this as the default view as well. So I can set the current view as the default. So anytime this list gets opened up, you can pick how the information is presented to the users. Another key benefit to using SharePoint lists and not Excel is this stuff is versioned. This stuff is kind of backed up in its own little way. So let me show you kind of what I mean when I say that. So I don't know if it's happened to me plenty of times in my life where I've saved a file, or I thought I saved a file on my desktop before all that stuff was kind of backed up, or on a server, and something happened. That file got lost. Or something got deleted out of a Word document that I was working on or collaborating with somebody else, or a Google Sheet, or whatever. That is a really, really cruddy experience. It stinks when you've worked on something and that information is thus lost. SharePoint lists by default have versioning on them. So that means anytime this list item is updated, it creates a new version of that, and it allows you to go back, or at least an administrator, somebody who has the correct permission to do so, and roll a version back. So I think we were doing some editing on Village Hall. I'm going to click this little ellipses next to the title here, and there's this version history. So we get to see all of the edits that we were making throughout the course of this call here. So we started out back at 11:24 here, which is about 5 or 6 minutes ago. We created the title, address, year built, square footage, all that good stuff. Then we see that we added the image at one point, square footage got updated here. So we have all of this version history here. We see who modified it, and we have the ability to view that and even restore that version. So this information, while maybe not 100% foolproof, it is much better than using Excel to store critical data, because we do have this version history behind it. We could always look at these items and roll it back if we need to. So we're well on our way to creating our first SharePoint list here, but we're got to keep moving along. I knew we were going to be short on time with this, so let's actually start using this information. So now I'm going to actually go back to my Public Works group. I'm going to create a second list. So now we have our inventory of facilities. I want to create a second list here. So I'm going to start a new list, and this list is going to be the actual facility inspections that do occur. And we're going to be able to connect that facility list to the actual inspections that we are going to conduct. So I'm going to call this one facility inspection, and that's my list name here. All right, so now I could use your help again in the chat. What are some things that you're looking out for during facility inspections here? Maybe saw some of that stuff before, but go ahead. If there's something that either whether you're doing it or some of your team members are doing facility inspections, what are some of those things that they're looking for on a routine basis? Go ahead and pop that in the chat. I'll start adding a few things in here. So we have our inspection date. I'm going to use that date and time field. Inspection date. Date of inspection. Not going to include the time. Save that. Let me check here. So we got code compliance, health and safety items. So let's just use a choice field here. Let's use a yes, no. All right, let's say compliant with code. That's a yes, no field. I'm just going to speed through creating some of these here just to show you how you can get started with this. We'll do one more here. So name of inspector, like that one, we get to use the person field here. So I'm just going to call it inspector. Metadata is important, name of inspector to be specific. I'm just going to go person or group. Yeah, let's show their profile picture in there. All right, cool. So we got a couple of fields here. So now we have our inspection. I want to call this inspector. You can always edit these. CTOR, inspector. All right, cool. So now we can come in here and the last thing that we want to do, so most importantly, is we want to, I'm actually going to hide this title field. I probably would use this for something, I don't know, maybe I would use this for something just so we can have a unique bit of information on this, but I'm going to hide this for now. The critical piece here is actually now using what's called a lookup field. So we can use this lookup. Now we can pull information from that facilities list. So facility, lookup. All right, so now we got to select a list as a source. It actually already found it for me. So I have facility inventory. So that was kudos to SharePoint. It found that for me. And what we want to see is the title out of that, which was the facility name. All right, so now we got the facility in there. I'm actually going to rearrange these. Just click and drag. You can rearrange them the way that you want to see them. Maybe I want inspector next on this. So now we have the ability to add an inspection in here. So I can go ahead and add a new item in here. So, we hid that title field. So I'm actually going to take that out of here, get rid of that title field. All right, actually I want to rearrange some of these as well, which I can do here. I can do facility first, inspector, inspection date, compliant with code. All right, looks good. So facility, now it's looking back up to that previous list we created. We have the police station, we have the village hall. We can type in our inspector here. Let's type in my cohort here, John Eric, as the inspector. Inspection date is today. Let's say it, yes, is indeed compliant with code. All right, if we save that, it gets added to the list. I'm seeing an error here, so we can try that again. Do a quick refresh. Whoop, accidentally added it a bunch of times. So it was adding it, which is a whoops, but it's a quick fix here. We can go ahead, select all of these records here, click the delete button, send them to the recycle bin. Anything you delete from here is stored for, I think, 30 days in the recycle bin, so you can restore those as well. So there's nice backup on this. So we see our record here. It's created, inspection date, compliant with code. We got our facility in there. Voila. Now, if we wanted to, now we want to start making this stuff accessible. Okay, so I actually want to create a little bit of a nicer form for our inspectors. Let's say they're using a tablet or something out in the field to do these inspections. You can use this forms button here at the top. You can create a new form, and it's just going to kind of simplify the input of this information here. It's using Microsoft Forms as kind of the background technology for this. So we can give a title, we can decorate it, we can add a logo in here. I'm just going to call it facility inspection. All right, and it already kind of put in the different fields that we have in this list here. We can add new if we wanted to, but we have everything that we want here. We can change the theme of it, make it look like our community's branding, and then you can do a notification if somebody submits a response on it. I'm going to turn that off for now. And we're going to make this live, accept responses on it, themes shown high. All right, so this is good enough. Let's go ahead and send this form. It's going to give you the ability to copy a link here. All right, so now let's start publishing this stuff out back onto our Public Works page here. So let me go back to our Public Works page. So my team has access to this stuff. So I'm going to go edit this SharePoint page, which is what this is. I'm going to add a quick link here. I'm going to add our link that I just copied from that inspection form. All right, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, make it clear what this is. Facility inspections. I'm going to decorate this a little bit. Let's use that little page edit. All right. So now we have our facility inspections form. And now I want to pin that data too. So if somebody wants to go in there and update a facility, I want to actually copy a link to that list for facilities. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. I'm going to go back. It's going to load me back to the Public Works SharePoint page. All of these lists live in the background of this SharePoint page. So if you go in the upper right-hand corner, go into Site Contents, we can navigate back to our facility inventory list. And I'm going to actually copy this URL. I'm going to drop the all items piece of this because that is specifying this view on the list. I'm going to drop that because all I want is the URL to the base list here. And I'm going to add that as a link. So my team in Public Works can get to that facility inventory. All right, let's publish this all back out here. So we are now seeing our process for facility inspections, which is really just the form that we built out. And we see our facility inventory data here. So I'm going to go back to Teams. I'm going to refresh this. Again, this is how I want team members to access their information, their data, all the stuff that's in Microsoft 365. So we got this stuff here. We see our facility inspections form here. Let's click it. I'm hoping it's going to open up our facility inspection form. Yes, it worked. All right, so now we can pick our village hall. We can say, Diana, my other cohort here, is the inspector on that inspection. It happened today. This one was not compliant with code. Boom. All right, now our team can pull this up on a mobile device, tablet, computer, it doesn't matter. You can enter your facility inspection information here. And let's go back to Teams. One thing I didn't pin was the actual results of the inspections. This is just the form, so I'll go fetch that here in just a moment. But let's see if we can see our facility inspections list here right through Teams. So go ahead and click that. And we have our 2 facilities we added, and we can edit this just like we did when we first built out this list. We can add columns to the list, we can add new, so it's nice that it just all fits here within Microsoft Teams. You can expand it so you get a little bit more real estate and you can see that stuff a little bit easier. All right, going back, let's see if our inspections are being captured here. So I'm going to go back into the back end of our Public Works site here. I'm going to facility inspections now, and I have our 2 inspections that we conducted with John, Eric, and Diana. So we have one that was compliant, one that was non-compliant. All right, so this is our first SharePoint list that we have built out, and we have our 2 inspections in here. We've been able to integrate that here all within Microsoft Teams, so you have the ability to see that. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at my list of things to keep us on track. We took a look at a handful of things. So throughout the course of the conversation thus far, we've taken a comparison against Excel, using SharePoint Lists to manage data and some of those advantages to doing that through a SharePoint list. We've also built out our first couple of SharePoint lists. We did that around facility inspections and facilities. We showed how we can connect those 2 things together and how we can use Microsoft Forms to build out a nice form that one of your team members can use to actually conduct their facility inspections. From there, we also saw how we can use the version history on that to roll back any changes. So we can take a look at these items here. We have the ability to look at the version on that and roll it back if we need to. So we see the version history here. So it makes it a more sustainable way to manage your data. And then lastly, we did publish this out through Teams. In this use case, we made this Public Works specific data, but if this is data that we wanted to publish out to the community at large, we'd probably put it in one of these other architectures that everybody had access to, and then you have the ability to decide who can edit this data, who has just view-only access on that data, and then you can push that out into different solutions that you build out. So I knew we were going to cover a lot of ground here. I had a second use case kind of on the back burner here, but we are running up against time here. So for those of you who are interested in building out a solution for managing gaming licenses, you could imagine how you can get started doing that in a very similar way. So I don't have enough time to go through the breadth of that, but let's say we have that process centralized with our administration group. What you would need is to develop out a business registry. So a list of all of the different businesses in your community. So here's just some examples of some businesses in the village of Brookfield here. And then from there, you can create a table, a list in SharePoint to actually manage the gaming license renewal process, add things in there like statuses and contact information, all that stuff, email address, and then really leverage the power of the Microsoft 365 platform tools like Power Automate to auto-generate notifications, emails, follow-ups, due dates, all that good stuff is possible. So I hope you all took something away today. So if you all have any questions, go ahead and pop those in the chat. I can hang around and answer a couple of more questions. If you liked what you saw today and want to learn more about Microsoft 365 and the tools that it offers, we are going to conduct another one of these webinars. It is related to Microsoft Copilot. So I'm actually going to copy a link to that in the chat. That's happening on Wednesday, August 6th. So go ahead and click that. Get registered. We're going to talk about Copilot. There's a Copilot version that all of you have access to, an AI type agent, and then there's a paid version. We'll kind of cover what the difference of those things are and what you can do with Copilot. But yeah, if you have any questions about anything that you saw here today or want to dive into something deeper, I'm going to hang around for a few more minutes. So go ahead and pop those questions in the chat. I see we have maybe a question or two here. So can you use SharePoint Lists to display addresses on a map to geolocate? So yes, that is, thank you for the question. So using SharePoint Lists to populate, say, points on a map. There is an integration with Esri. So Esri is the big GIS software provider. So that is possible. You just have to work through potential licensing implications of that. Those who do have availability to Esri licensing, you can do that at no additional cost. So I don't want to get into the complexities of the licensing situation there, but if you have latitude and longitude in that list, you can actually do that, I think, at no additional licensing costs. But again, I don't want to get in the complexities of that. If I scroll down here on my Public Works page, you can see there's no data behind this, but this is an Esri integration into SharePoint. So just kind of demonstrating that maps are possible in Microsoft 365. And then you have to kind of go through the process of adding a layer to your map here, and then you can start to see those address dots and stuff on a map. But again, you got to work the data in the background to do that, either having some Esri licensing or having the latitude, longitude populated in that SharePoint list. All right. Seeing no other questions here in the chat, feel free to add one in there. I really greatly appreciate your time and attention this afternoon. I really hope you join us for the next webinar around Copilot, Copilot Chat, the full licensed version of Copilot. Some really cool stuff that we can do with that tool that is now widely available to you all. So thank you all so much for being here. And there should be a recording that you get an alert as soon as this webinar is processed if you want to review anything we went over today. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you all soon.